the greatest barrier between you and the wealth you are capable of building is not a lack of money? What if it's not a lack of intelligence, education, connections, or opportunity? What if the real barrier is a mental framework you developed years ago, one that quietly taught you that being seen is dangerous? You see, many wealthy and successful people have had to overcome fear, rejection, insecurity, failure, and shame. Now, the difference is not that wealthy people never experience shame. The difference is that many of them learn how to stop allowing shame to make their decisions. And for women over 40, this conversation can be especially powerful because by this stage of life, you may have accumulated wisdom, experience, expertise, discernment, and resilience. But you may also have accumulated disappointment. You remember the opportunities that did not work, right? The relationships that unfortunately had to end, or maybe fortunately, the businesses that actually failed. You started something, but you just couldn't follow through. The jobs where you were overlooked, the mistakes you wish you could take back. And sometimes you are not afraid that you cannot exceed. You are afraid that success will make you visible. And visibility may expose the parts of your story you've been working hard to hide. But today, on this video, I want to ask you, are you struggling because you lack value or because shame has convinced you to hide the value you already possess? Stay tuned. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Sarah, and in this video, I want to focus on why some women 40 and over have been able to overcome the shame barrier and build wealth while others have not been able to. But those that you haven't, please stay tuned to the end because you're going to learn something. Now let's start with our mental framework. So a mental framework is the internal system that you and I use to interpret ourselves. You know, we use it to interpret other people, opportunities, money, failure, and success. Think of it like a pair of invisible glasses. You may look at the same opportunity as someone else, but your framework determines what you see, okay? Your prescription. So one person sees an opportunity and thinks something like, I need to learn more, but I can figure this out. And another person sees the same opportunity and might think, I'm not qualified. Somebody else is probably better than me, okay? The opportunity may be identical, but it's the interpretation is different from both people, right? And your interpretation influences your behavior, by the way. Yes, it does. Your behavior influences your decisions. And your decisions influence your outcomes. This is why changing your life is not always about working harder, my friends. Sometimes it's about examining the beliefs that are directing your work, okay? Many wealthy people develop mental frameworks that allow them to see challenges as information, not as proof that they are inadequate. They may ask themselves something like, what can I learn from this? What is the opportunity here? Like, what is the opportunity? They examine the opportunity. What problem can I solve? They ask themselves. Or they can say, who can help me? They're not afraid to ask for help, okay? Or they'll say, how can I improve this? But shame asks a different question. The person with the shame mindset, they'll say something like, what is wrong with me? And that question can keep a woman trapped for years. Now, let's look at the science here, the psychology, how shame can actually affect our decisions. Now, from a psychological perspective, shame is not simply an unpleasant emotion. We know it doesn't feel good, but it's not just that. Shame can affect how people perceive risk, respond to criticism, and evaluate their own ability. So when a person experiences shame, the mind may become focused on protecting the self from rejection, embarrassment, or even being exposed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, can actually create avoidance. You avoid applying because you may be rejected. You avoid starting the business because people may criticize it. You avoid posting the video because someone from your past may see it. You avoid raising your prices because someone may say you're not worth it. You avoid asking for the promotion because you are afraid the answer will be no. And eventually, avoidance can feel like wisdom. That's deception there. You may say, I'm just waiting for the right time. Haven't we said that before? Yes, let me know in the comment section if you've said that. Or you might say, I need to prepare a little bit more. Always striving for perfection. Stop it. Or you might say, I'm still working on my confidence. That's fair. But sometimes preparation is more productive. And sometimes preparation becomes a socially acceptable hiding place. Because you can spend 10 years preparing for a life that requires one courageous decision. You see, the brain often prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar possibility. Note that. Even when the familiar situation is frustrating, your nervous system may interpret it as a safer place because it's predictable, right? And that is why some women, even men, remain in environments where they are undervalued. Undervalued. Not because they do not desire more, but because the unknown feels more dangerous than the disappointment they already understand. Now let's look at what wealthy people learn to do differently. Let's learn this. You see, many wealthy and successful people learn to separate their identity and their outcomes. Yes, separate their identity from their outcome. They understand a failed idea does not mean I am a failure. They don't take it personally. A rejected proposal does not mean I have no value. A financial loss does not mean I will never recover. Instead, they may interpret failure as feedback. They ask themselves something like, what actually worked? What did not work? And why didn't it work? What did we miss? What needs to change? What can I do differently? What can they do differently? That is a wealth building mental framework, my friends. Because when you make every failure a judgment about your identity, you become afraid to experiment. Yes. And wealth often requires experimentation. It requires learning. It requires calculated risk. It requires the ability to make decisions without having every answer. But you see, shame, that shame barrier, demands certainty, control. Shame says, do not move until you know you cannot fail. But wisdom says, gather information, prepare responsibly, and learn as you go. Learn as you take those steps, yes? Now, let's look at the biblical framework to this to help us with shame, all right? Because in a biblical framework, you are a steward, not a prisoner of your past. And the Bible gives us a powerful example in the parable of the talents. This you can find in the book of Matthew, chapter 25, where you see one servant received 5 talents, another received 2, and another received 1 talent. And the servant with the 1 talent says, I'm afraid, specifically, he said, I was afraid, basically to invest his talent, to use his talent. And because he was afraid, he buried that talent. He buried it. He didn't want to use it. Notice that his problem was not that he received nothing. His problem was that fear changed what he did with what he received. He hid it. Even, he hid that 1 talent. It's better than nothing, right? And I want you to consider this. How many women have buried their gifts because they're afraid of being judged? Because they just have that 1 talent. How many have buried their leadership ability, their creativity, their expertise, their business idea, their voice. How many? Their knowledge. How many have buried their knowledge? Their fear of judgment, what people would say. You've buried your purpose because you're just, criticizing yourself, really. See, the thing is, women, men, you may still possess the gift, but fear has disconnected the gift from action. And potential without action cannot create the impact it was designed to create. Now, the biblical principle is not that every gift automatically produces wealth, but the principle here is stewardship. What are you doing with what God has placed in your hands? Are you developing it? Are you using it? Are you sharing it? Or are you hiding it because you're afraid of what people may say? Other people's opinion does not pay your bills. Now, let's look at a shame framework versus the wealth framework to help you. See, a shame framework says, I must prove that I am worthy. Proving. We don't want that. A wealth building framework says, I have value and I can continue developing my ability. You see, nobody's perfect. Now, a shame framework says, if I make a mistake, people will discover I'm not good enough. It always goes back to self. But a growth framework, which builds wealth, says, mistakes can teach me what I need to improve. Now, again, a shame framework, a shame mentality says, someone else is already doing this, so there is no room for me in this marketplace or in this business segment. But the wealth building mindset says someone else's success proves that a market may exist and I can bring my own experience and perspective. Doesn't it bring freedom to you? Now, how this? Again, a shame mindset says I need everyone to approve of me. Very self-conscious person. But a purpose-driven, wealthy-driven mindset person says, I need to serve the people. I am called and equipped to help. Very courageous person, very certain. And this is important. Wealthy thinking is not pretending that money is the only measure of success. No. Wealth can include financial resources, wisdom, relationships, influence, health, purpose, and the ability to create opportunities for others. But financial wealth often requires you to solve problems, communicate value, build trust, and make decisions, and allow people to know what you can do. And shame can interfere with every one of those behaviors, by the way. So, why is this important for women over 40? Why is this important for you all? Well, women over 40, you may have something that cannot be rushed, which is experience. You have lived through situations that taught you discernment. You have learned how people behave, especially yours. You understand leadership. You recognize patterns. You may have survived seasons that forced you to become stronger, wiser, and certainly more resourceful. But sometimes women compare themselves to younger people who appear more confident online, for example. And then shame, that voice of shame says, you are too old. You are too late. All of these are lies. All of this is a deception. You should have started years ago, that voice of shame says. But you see, your age is not evidence that your opportunity has expired. No. Your experience may be the foundation of your next assignment. Think about that. You may not need to compete with someone who has a different journey. No. You may just need to identify the problem that your specific experience uniquely prepares you to solve. Because you see, your knowledge has value. Your knowledge has value. Your story has value. Your insight has value in the marketplace. And the lessons you learned may become the solution someone else is willing to invest in. So, how should you begin to break this cycle of shame? Glad you asked. Well, here we go. First, identify the belief beneath your fears. Ask yourself this: when did I begin believing that being visible was unsafe? When did you start believing that? Who taught me? Another question: who taught me that confidence was arrogance? How about this? What am I afraid people would discover about me? What past experience am I allowing to predict my future? How about this? Secondly, separate your identity from your performance. Very important. You are more than your worst decision. You are more than your greatest disappointment. You are more than the chapter that did not work. If we look in the Bible again, in the book of Romans chapter 8, verse 1, it tells us, there is therefore now no condemnation, no judgment, in other words, to them which are in Christ Jesus. Condemnation says, the voice of condemnation says, you're permanently defined by your past. Now, grace, a new beginning from Christ, says, your past can teach you, but it does not have to imprison you. It's a teacher. Thirdly, practice strategic visibility. You do not have to reveal every private detail of your life. You do not have to become loud. You do not have to perform confidence. Again, you do not have to perform confidence, but you may need to communicate your value very often. Yes. Share the insight, my friend. Teach what you know. All right. Explain the problem you specifically can solve. And then start the conversation. Apply for the opportunity. Just do it. Allow your work to become visible. Someone is going to appreciate it, because people cannot connect with value they never encounter. So stop telling yourself lies that what you have is not valuable. If you don't put it out there and allow people to respond, how will you know? See, many of you are listening to the deceptive voice in your head, that judge, that jury in your mind. It's lying to you. Stop. Review the things I've spoken about on this video. Watch it again if you need to, and take notes, because your future is waiting for you, practically begging for you. But you must overcome shame. And I did this video because a lot of my clients, once in a while, I do sense that they're going through shame or overcoming shame. So I do these type of exercises with them. Shame is a barrier, and time waits for no one. So acknowledge that there is a barrier of shame if you believe it's there. Go through the steps of why the shame is there in the first place, and understand you are not the only person that's had a rough start in life, but your end is going to be impeccable, absolutely impeccable. Now, with that being said, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up to show appreciation, and let me know what you thought in the comment section, or anything you want to add to the community to learn from you. Thank you for my subscribers. I appreciate you all.